They handed my mother a bouquet and called her the proud parent of the new beauty queen, but the girl they crowned wasn't me. It was Gussie. Again, I stood there backstage, sweat sliding down my spine under the heat of the lights, still in my evening gown, makeup flawless, posture perfect. But none of it mattered. The announcer never even looked in my direction. My name hadn't made the final five. My mother didn't wait for me. She was already on stage, arms wrapped around Gussie, tears in her eyes like she'd just witnessed the second coming. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stared at the crowd cheering, at the judges smiling, and wondered how many favors were exchanged behind those curtains. How many whispers, how many backstage arrangements, how many chances Gussie got handed before she even stepped into her heels. And still, I clapped. For her. Like I always had, because I was used to it. When I was 8, Gussie spilled fruit punch on my solo recital costume. 5 minutes before curtain call, my stepmother said it was an accident. At 10, she broke my violin and cried so convincingly that my own father blamed me for being careless. At 14, she kissed John at my birthday party and then told everyone I had been pressuring him. The look in his eyes that night, he didn't deny it. He just stayed silent. Gussie wasn't cruel. Not in the obvious ways. She was careful, calculating, sweet in public, poisoned sugar in private. And for years, I swallowed it all. I swallowed their favoritism, their excuses, their blind admiration. Until I couldn't, because the night she was crowned again, I didn't go home. I stayed behind, and when the janitor came by, I was still in the dressing room, wiping off my lipstick and staring at the mirror like I didn't recognize myself anymore. The crown should have been mine, not because I wanted to take it from her, but because I earned it. But I hadn't played dirty. And that was my mistake. That night, I made a choice. I wouldn't walk off the stage again. I'm Miranda, the second daughter, the one who blends into family photos, not because I want to, but because no one ever bothers to center the frame around me. My mother married Gussie's father when I was 6. She used to tell me it would be good for me. You'll have a sister now, she said, placing a hand on my shoulder like I should be grateful. Girls without siblings grow up lonely, but if loneliness means sitting quietly at the dinner table while Gussie recited every word of praise she got from her teachers that day, then I wasn't spared it. If it means having no one notice when I win my school's spelling bee or post top of the class, then loneliness didn't leave it, simply learned how to smile with teeth and pretend it belonged. A T first. I tried. I really did. I thought maybe, if I dressed like her, spoke like her, laughed when she laughed, my mother would notice me too. Maybe she'd say my name with that same dreamy fondness she used for Gussie. But all I ever got was comparison. Why can't you be more outgoing? Like Gussie? Try to smile more. Miranda, Gussie always lights up a room. Don't slouch. Look how straight Gussie stands. She was 2 months older than me and treated like she descended from royalty. I was just the girl who needed to improve. Our birthdays were only 8 weeks apart, but the way the house was decorated for hers made mine look like an afterthought. Gussie had curls that bounced when she walked. My hair was straight and too stubborn to hold shape. She had blue eyes that caught the light. Mine were brown and quiet. People noticed her. At school, at church, at dinner. I was the girl they asked to take the photo, not the one they posed with. And the worst part, she was nice. She always had this careful, polite kindness, the type that looked generous, but always came with conditions. She'd offer to help me pick out a dress for a school dance, then accidentally get the same one. She'd praise me in public, then whisper behind closed doors that I was trying too hard. My mother adored her. She called her my little swan, ran her fingers through Gussie's hair like she was the daughter she'd always dreamed of. She never touched mine. I could have chopped it all off, and I doubt she'd have noticed until picture day. And yet, I stayed quiet. I told myself it was okay, that I wasn't flashy, that I didn't need to be center stage, that winning quietly still mattered, but quiet never won in our house. Not when Gussie could fake a cough and get out of chores, while I was up washing dishes even with a fever. Not when I worked part-time at 16 to save for college, while she got a new car for just passing her driving test. Not when I asked for a dress for prom and my mother said it was too expensive right after she booked a $500 photo shoot for Gussie's latest crown. There were nights I'd lie in bed wondering what I did wrong. Why love had terms and conditions. Why being born second meant being second in everything. John was the only one who used to see me. Back then, he was our neighbor, 3 years older, with a quiet voice and a smile that made my chest feel like it might crack. He'd sit beside me when no one else did at community events. He remembered my favorite candy. He once lent me his jacket when it rained after a school play, and I held onto it for weeks like it was some kind of promise. But then Gussie noticed him too, and everything shifted. One afternoon, I came home to see Gussie laughing in our backyard, her hand on John's arm. He didn't pull away, and just like that, he started looking through me, smiling past me, forgetting the way he used to wait for me outside debate practice. I didn't blame him. Gussie knew how to become someone's gravity. She didn't pull, she drew people in gently, like the world naturally tilted her way. So I stopped trying. I focused on grades, on working, on saving. I told myself I didn't care about stages or crowns. I didn't care about applause or dresses or attention. That was Gussie's world. Mine would be built on something more stable, something they couldn't take from me. Until the night I stood behind the curtain, watching her take another trophy, another title, another kiss on the cheek from my mother. Something broke, not because she won, but because I had never even been allowed to try. So I did. I submitted the application on the last eligible day. I used my savings to buy a gown from a secondhand shop and tailored it myself. I practiced posture in front of mirrors, read every pageant interview question ever posted online, watched every video I could find of former contestants. I studied not for school, but for that stage. And still, I told no one, because I didn't want support. I wanted silence. Just this once, I wanted to see what I could become when no one was dragging me backward. I made it to preliminaries without anyone knowing. My name on the roster was listed under my full name, Miranda Sinclair, so Gussie didn't notice it the morning she skimmed the sheet, sipping her chai latte and laughing with her coach. She wasn't supposed to be there that day. I thought she was still tied up at a different pageant across state lines. But Gussie had a way of rearranging fate, especially when the spotlight was involved. I was in the dressing room tightening my gown's waist ribbon when I heard her voice outside the curtain. Someone said they saw Miranda. Isn't that funny? My hand froze mid-tie. Her coach chuckled. She wouldn't dare. This is national level. I know, right? She doesn't even know how to walk in heels without looking like a scared horse. The girls nearby laughed. I stared into the mirror, not at my face but at the steel that had started to settle beneath it. I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I walked out minutes later for the mock queue and around. Gussie was seated front row, legs crossed, smile perfectly lacquered in gloss. She looked up at me like she couldn't quite believe I had the audacity to exist. When I answered the judge's question about leadership with calm precision, I saw her shift in her seat. When I finished speaking, she was already walking backstage. She cornered me near the makeup counter. Why are you here? Her voice was soft, breathy, just loud enough for only me to hear. The same tone she'd always used when lying through her teeth. I applied. Same as you. You knew this was mine. There's no name on the stage. She stepped closer. You think you'll win? You don't even belong in the top 10. I looked her dead in the eyes. I'm not here to beat you. I'm here because I finally remembered I exist. Her jaw twitched, but she backed away because the cameras were on. Gussie knew how to pick her battles, and she never fought where anyone could see her bleed. That night, I advanced. The judges smiled at me. One even pulled me aside to compliment my articulation. I could feel it momentum, something Gussie hadn't expected. 2 nights later, the betrayal came. I woke up to a flood of messages, anonymous screenshots, tweets, a Reddit thread. Someone had posted photos of me in a changing room, nothing revealing, but the angle was invasive. The captions were worse, trying to sneak into her sister's pageant. Pathetic. Look at her, hoping for second place at best. Did she steal that dress too? The images were traced to an Instagram burner. New account, no followers. But the handle included my name, Miranda Sinclair, exposed. I knew immediately who did it, not because I had proof but because Gussie always knew how to draw blood while keeping her hands clean. Still, I said nothing. The officials reviewed the incident. They confirmed the account wasn't mine and allowed me to continue. But the damage was done. Whispers followed me in the hallway. Girls moved their things when I sat too close. Even a few judges looked at me differently after that. I went from rising star to controversy in less than 48 hours. Back at home, my mother called me for the first time in weeks. Not to ask how I was doing, not to tell me she was proud, but to scold me. Did you really have to compete against Gussie? Couldn't you just support her like a good sister? She's not my sister. Silence hung heavy. Miranda, she said finally, voice trembling with that performative disappointment I knew so well. How could you say something so cruel? Cruel? That word echoed louder than it should have. Cruel was watching your own mother zip another girl's dress while telling you your waist was too thick. Cruel was hearing her gush about Gussie's natural grace, all you rehearsed alone. In the garage. Because no one would drive you to practice. But I didn't say any of that. I just hung up. The final straw came when I overheard John outside the auditorium the day before the finale. He was talking to one of Gussie's friends. Yeah. I used to like Miranda, but she's always been kind of intense. Gussie just makes people feel good. I stood there, 10 feet away, hearing my past self being discarded like an old memory. The jacket he gave me, the birthday gift he never claimed, all of it, rewritten by Gussie's smile. She'd taken everything, and somehow made it look like I'd handed it to her willingly. I walked into the dressing room that evening like a ghost of myself. But when I sat down in front of the mirror, I saw something surprising. I didn't look broken. I looked focused, because somewhere in the wreckage, the fire had started to glow again. I had nothing left to prove to them, but I still had something to prove to myself. Every step toward the finale felt heavier than the one before. I wasn't nervous about performing. I was terrified of not being seen again, of stepping onto that stage, giving every ounce of myself, and still watching the crown go to the same person it always did. Gussie had the spotlight in her blood. She knew how to tilt her head, smile just right, pause before answering a question so it looked thoughtful instead of rehearsed. And me? I had practiced in secret, rehearsed in silence, and studied until my eyes stung. But hard work doesn't always win when charm steals the show. I stayed quiet during rehearsals. Girls whispered. I could feel their glances, the way they leaned closer to Gussie and farther from me, like guilt was contagious. Some of them believed the rumors, others pretended not to. But none of them asked me what was true, and I hated that it still hurt. I hated that after everything, after pushing through years of dismissal, after reclaiming just one page of the story for myself, I still looked over my shoulder for validation. I still wanted someone to say, "You belong here," even now, when I'd sworn I didn't care. The night before the finale, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my bed staring at the dress I'd chosen for the final round. It wasn't flashy. No glitter. No plunging neckline. Just elegance, clean lines, soft shimmer, subtle confidence. It was a mirror of who I was trying to become. But as I stared at it, I doubted every choice. Was it too safe? Was I too safe? Was there something in me that made people overlook me? Did I speak too softly? Was I too serious? Was I not pretty enough? Not likable enough? Not enough? I gripped the blanket tighter, jaw clenched, heart racing against logic. My thoughts spiraled like they always did, quiet chaos behind a calm face. I thought of my mother, of her clapping for Gussie, not even noticing the tears I'd swallowed. At every event, I thought of the dressing room rumors, the silence of classmates who once sat next to me, but wouldn't now. I thought of John, how easily he'd said she made people feel good, as if I did. End single quotes T.as if I hadn't spent my whole life trying to. I'd convinced myself that success would erase the pain, that standing tall on that stage, holding the crown, would fix the wound carved into me by years of being second best. But now, I wasn't sure. What if I won and it still hurt? What if I lost and proved them all right? I wrapped my arms around my knees and buried my face. But the tears didn't come. Not this time. I had cried for so many versions of myself already. The one who just wanted her mom to smile at her. The one who practiced dances alone. The one who swallowed every insult with a smile. That girl wasn't here anymore. What remained was a quieter ache. A sadness that didn't scream but stayed. It hummed in my bones like a storm waiting behind the clouds. I woke up the next morning hollow and alert, like something inside had frozen overnight. I dressed without emotion, painted on a face with steady hands, smoothed the gown over my hips without even looking in the mirror. I was done performing for anyone who didn't care. Backstage, Gussie stood with her usual entourage, all soft laughter and fake modesty. When she saw me, she didn't look away. She looked through me, as if I was just a speed bump before her next crown. I smiled, not because I felt like it, but because I knew something she didn't. She needed to be adored. I didn't. I only needed to stand there and let the truth show itself, because I hadn't cheated. I hadn't manipulated. I hadn't cried to get sympathy or faked injuries to gain advantage. Everything I was about to show the world was mine alone, but that didn't make it easy. As I waited behind the curtain, my hands started to shake. I pressed them against my thighs to still them, but the fear was creeping in again. Not fear of losing, but fear of being invisible. What if I gave everything, and it wasn't enough? What if this was the last time I tried? I closed my eyes, took a breath, and whispered into the darkness around me, like it would carry the words forward. Please see me. The music changed, my name was called, and I walked forward, not like someone trying to win, but like someone who finally refused to hide. The crowd applauded politely when I reached center stage, but it wasn't the roar that followed Gussie's entrance. Her name had become an expectation, and mine was still a surprise. They weren't sure how to react to. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I could hear the old voice echoing, don't mess up, don't breathe wrong, don't give them a reason to say you don't belong. The cue and a segment came first. I stepped forward under the hot lights, my palms cold but steady. A judge asked me, if given a platform, how would you use your voice to create impact? I looked at the audience, at the rows of strangers, at my mother sitting with Gussie's stepmom, both of them leaning forward but still not seeing me. I saw John beside them, arms folded, bored, and I said, by showing that you don't need to be the loudest or the most adored to have something worth listening to. A silence hung for a second, then applause, real applause, the kind that doesn't sound polite. Gussie's face twitched slightly from the corner of the stage. That's when the twist came. The host, with an over-rehearsed smile, stepped up to the mic and said there had been a last-minute update. An anonymous email submitted that morning had requested an integrity review of one of the finalists. The committee had chosen to be transparent and announced that a handwriting match had linked the original pageant rumor account Miranda Sinclair, exposed to an address signed by Gussie's former coach, a woman who was no longer affiliated with any official teams. Gasps filled the room, my breath caught, but the host wasn't done. While we cannot conclusively prove the finalists' involvement, he said carefully, we believe in upholding the values of fairness, and we feel our audience has the right to know. Gussie didn't move, her expression didn't falter, but everyone was staring. Someone from her entourage stood and shouted from the crowd. She had nothing to do with it, but the timing was all wrong. It sounded rehearsed, like a line from a bad scene. A few judges leaned toward one another, whispering. One of them raised an eyebrow. Another looked down at her notes. The spell Gussie had cast for so long of being untouchable, angelic, was breaking, and she knew it. Her gaze met mine from across the stage. She didn't look angry, she looked scared. For the first time, Gussie looked like the outsider. The host continued with the show like nothing had happened, but the energy had changed. I could feel it pulsing through the floorboards. For once, I wasn't the shadow standing behind her glow. For once, I was the storm she hadn't seen coming. The final round was the performance segment. It was a recent addition to the pageant, meant to showcase personal expression. Most girls danced or sang, some read poetry. Gussie had prepared a contemporary ballet piece that her coach once described as emotion in motion. I knew she'd be good. I also knew her plan was to follow her dance with a tearful story about her struggles with anxiety and body image, something she'd never mentioned until it became a trending topic. I had written a monologue, just me, a microphone, and silence to fill. Gussie went before me. Her performance was as flawless as ever. Perfect pirouettes, soft landings, arms like wings. The music swelled at all the right moments. Her tears fell exactly when the spotlight dimmed. And when she curtsied, the audience stood. Of course they did, because when Gussie performs, she doesn't just ask for sympathy, she demands it. And people give it, even when they don't understand what they're applauding. She walked past me backstage, cheeks flushed from exertion and praise, but her eyes weren't warm. You should withdraw, she whispered without looking at me. You don't want to embarrass yourself. I didn't answer, because her words weren't sharp enough to cut through the clarity I had now. They called my name. I walked out alone. No music, no movement, just the echo of heels and a mic waiting center stage. I stood in front of it and took a breath, and then I began. When I was 9, my mother told me I had quiet talent. She said it like an apology, as if being quiet made it less worthy, as if talent needed volume to be seen. People shifted in their seats. I spent most of my life in the shadows of louder people, louder smiles, louder stories, people who knew how to cry on cue, how to turn pain into performance. And I believed, for a long time, that I wasn't enough. That if I didn't sparkle like they did, I wasn't worth looking at. I scanned the audience. Some leaned forward, others blinked slowly, caught in the weight of stillness. But I've learned something. I've learned that being overlooked doesn't mean you're lesser. It means people are distracted. And sometimes the most powerful things don't shout. They stand, they endure, they wait until someone's finally ready to listen. There were no gasps, no applause, just silence, a kind of silence that felt like being heard. I didn't come here to outshine anyone. I came to show that you don't have to twist yourself into someone else's story to matter. I'm Miranda, and this is me. Not loud, not showy, but real. Then I walked off. I didn't bow. I didn't wait for applause. And that was the loudest thing I'd ever done. Backstage, Gussie stared at me. Her mouth was slightly open, her fingers clutching her dress too tightly. You think that'll win you points? She hissed. I looked at her calmly. No, I think it'll finally make people stop looking only at you. The final deliberation took longer than expected. Girls waited in tight clusters. Gussie paced. She tried to act cool, but I saw her checking her reflection in her phone, adjusting her lipstick, whispering to one of the junior assistants. When the host returned, the room stilled. We'd like to thank all our finalists for their incredible grace and talent, he said, holding an envelope. After careful deliberation, our judges have made their decision. The lights dimmed. A spotlight found me and Gussie, standing side by side, and then the national pageant crown goes to Miranda Sinclair. The auditorium erupted. Not the cautious clapping I'd grown used to, but real applause. Raw and loud and utterly mine. I heard someone shout my name. A judge stood and clapped with both hands. One of the junior finalists cried with joy, but all I saw was Gussie, frozen, smiling a little too wide, clapping without touching her palms. Together, her eyes wet not with tears of joy, but with something harder, something that stung more than losing, disbelief. The crown was placed on my head. A sash followed. Flashbulbs went off. Reporters yelled my name. I turned once slowly and saw my mother standing in the crowd with a stunned expression, lips parted, like she wasn't sure whether to smile or frown. I didn't wave at her. I didn't wave at anyone, because I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was being, and that was enough. After the ceremony, I found Gussie in the dressing room. She stood in front of a mirror, holding her runner-up sash like it might strangle her. When she saw me, she smiled too quickly. Congratulations, she said, voice brittle. I nodded. Thank you. There was a pause. Then she whispered, they'll forget you. And I said, maybe, but they'll remember what I said. She stared at me. You never wanted the crown, she said. No, I replied. I wanted to stop disappearing. And in that moment, I watched something inside her fracture. Because Gussie had always believed power came from winning, from applause, from being chosen. But I had chosen myself, and no one could take that away. After the crown was placed on my head, the applause eventually faded, the flashes slowed, and the stage emptied. But my world had only just begun to expand. That night, I didn't go home with my family. I didn't ride in their car or sit silently in the back seat while they praised Gussie for being graceful in defeat. I didn't stand in the kitchen awkwardly while my mother cut a cake she hadn't baked for me. There was no celebration waiting for me in that house, and I wasn't about to beg for one. Instead, I walked out of the venue with the crown still perched on my head and the sash brushing against my gown. Ryan was waiting by the car. He'd driven 3 hours just to be there, even though I hadn't asked him to come. He didn't say anything when he saw me. He didn't need to. He just opened the door, and for the first time in my life, I left somewhere feeling like someone. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Dark Horse Miranda Sinclair takes the national crown. Runner-up Gussie caught in alleged sabotage scandal. Pageant darling dethroned, a new star rises. Reporters wanted interviews. Podcasts wanted to feature me. And talent agencies, the same ones who'd once fawned over Gussie, now reached out to me. I wasn't a background character anymore. I was the story. My mother texted once, proud of you. Can we talk? I didn't reply, because I remembered all the times I had tried to talk and she had looked past me. All the birthdays she forgot. All the praise she gave to someone else, while I stood inches away, starving for even a nod. One crown doesn't erase a lifetime of being overlooked. And I had no desire to fix a mirror that had always been cracked on one side. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks after the finale, Gussie was invited to a minor fashion expo, trying to maintain relevance. She wore a new designer dress, posed for cameras, and smiled like she still had control. But the scandal lingered. People whispered. Brands hesitated. Her coach had been blacklisted for unethical behavior, and while Gussie insisted she had no idea, no one fully believed her. Then came the final blow. I was invited as the keynote speaker at the annual Women in Excellence Gala. They offered to feature my monologue as a closing performance. I accepted, but I rewrote the final lines. As I stood on stage in a fitted black dress, no crown, no glitter, just power, I looked out into the crowd. Gussie was seated near the back, her posture perfect, her smile still camera ready. But her eyes held something else now, worry. I delivered my new ending slowly, letting each word echo. Some people build their empires by climbing over others. But those empires, they don't last. Because eventually, the truth finds its voice. And when it speaks, it doesn't need to scream. It only needs to stand. When I stepped off stage, the applause rose to its feet. The event director met me backstage with teary eyes and a bouquet larger than I could carry. It wasn't just praise, it was recognition. The kind Gussie could never manipulate her way into again. The next day, her sponsorships quietly disappeared. Brand by brand, partnership by partnership. Companies no longer wanted to be associated with her name. She tried damage control apologies, posts, staged interviews, but it was too late. The girl who once cried for sympathy had dried out her well. Meanwhile, I signed with a literary agent, my first book, The Quiet One, a story of shadows, crowns, and choosing yourself, sold out within weeks of its release. In one chapter, I wrote, I used to think revenge was fire. But it's not. It's ice. It's patience. It's watching them feel what you felt. Only now, they're the ones shouting into silence. And still, I wasn't done. The final piece came quietly. I got a letter from a prestigious arts foundation, a grant, large and unexpected. They wanted to fund a scholarship in my name, not for pageantry, for girls who were overlooked, girls who were never picked, girls who didn't shine loud, but deep. I accepted, but I made one condition. The first recipient had to come from my hometown. The press release didn't mention Gussie, but the local papers knew. And when her old school featured a girl with a soft voice and scuffed shoes holding up the certificate with my name on it, the contrast was sharp enough to cut glass. A reporter asked Gussie if she'd like to say anything about me during a red carpet interview. She smiled, tight, hollow. Miranda's, very determined. That was all she could say, because she knew this wasn't just a win. It was the end of her reign, and the beginning of mine. I didn't need a throne. I had something better, a name that meant something, a voice that didn't apologize, a life that wasn't centered around approval but purpose. And every time I walk past my crown, resting inside a glass case in my office, I remember the girl who stood backstage in silence, hoping for a miracle. Now, she doesn't need miracles. She is one.